The Foundation Era. Basketball got its start back in 1891 when James Naismith invented the game in Springfield, Massachusetts. It was originally designed as a way to keep athletes in shape during the winter months. Just a few years later, colleges all over the country started adopting it. By the early 1900s, basketball was exploding on college campuses, but this era looked wildly different from the game we know today. There was no shot clock, so teams constantly stalled with the ball, just passing around to kill time. Some games had final scores as low as 7-4. Yeah, that was a real thing. There was also no three-point line, which made outside shooting way less valuable. The entire focus was on passing, cutting, and set plays around the basket. It was a much slower, grinded-out style that was more about precision than speed or flash. Physical play was a big part of the game too, with far fewer fouls called than today. Teams could pretty much body each other up all game long without seeing much whistle action. Dribbling was actually illegal at first, then eventually allowed, but only as a way to advance the ball, not to attack the rim. The rules kept evolving quickly. In 1895, they established 5 players per side, which became the standard. Before that, some games had up to 9 players on the floor per team. Scoring back then was brutal. Free throws were worth 1 point, field goals just 2, and since defenses packed the paint without fear of outside shots, points were incredibly tough to come by. Traveling restrictions were tight. Players had to maintain a pivot foot almost religiously, and any lifting of that foot was a turnover. The game was mostly half-court based with very few transition plays. Fast breaks barely existed because the style just did not encourage it. There were powerhouse programs even in this primitive era. Teams like University of Pennsylvania, Yale, and Columbia dominated the early decades. In the Midwest, Kansas started gaining national attention under the coaching of none other than Forrest Fogg Allen, who learned directly from Naismith himself. Allen would become one of the most important figures in coaching history, but for decades, there was no national championship tournament. Teams claimed mythical national titles based on polls or regional dominance. That finally changed. In 1939, when the very first NCAA tournament was created, Oregon won that inaugural title, defeating Ohio State. The Foundation Era was really about laying the groundwork. Rules were being written and rewritten constantly as the sport figured itself out. Offenses were basic but disciplined. Defenses were suffocating, and the pace was methodical. This was basketball in its rawest form, structured, patient, and brutal for anyone who wanted to actually score. The Big Man Era. From 1940 through 1956, the game shifted heavily toward the post. Centers absolutely dominated everything. Offenses revolved around feeding the ball inside, and the tallest players had massive advantages over everybody else on the court. This was the era where size completely dictated success. The paint became the battleground. Teams pounded the ball inside over and over, running slow, methodical offenses that focused on post-ups and close-range shots. There was almost no floor spacing because the three-point line still did not exist. Guards mostly acted as facilitators, feeding the big men and staying out of the way. In 1944, the NCAA finally outlawed goaltending, which had become a major issue thanks to taller players, swatting shots straight out of the air. Before that rule change, dominant centers could basically camp under the rim and block anything they wanted without consequences. Once goaltending was banned, offensive players finally had a fair shot at actually scoring near the hoop. Defensively, teams stayed packed into the paint. With no threat of outside shooting, defenses just clogged the lane and forced opponents into contested shots. The pace stayed slow, and every possession was deliberate. Transition play was rare, and the emphasis was entirely on half-court execution. This era produced some absolute legends. George Mikan of DePaul was easily the most dominant figure of the time. Standing 6 feet 10 inches, Mikan completely reshaped what people thought a basketball player could be. His hook shots, rebounding, and shot blocking made him nearly unstoppable. Mikan's dominance in college eventually carried over to the professional game, where he continued to crush opponents. Other standout big men included Bob Curlin from Oklahoma A&M, who was the first player to win back-to-back NCAA championships in 1945 and 1946. Curlin was one of the tallest players of his era, measuring 7 feet tall, and he used that size to overwhelm anyone in his way. The success of these giants forced teams to start recruiting based on height more than anything else. Coaches prioritized size even if the player was not particularly skilled, because a tall player could still dominate just by being near the basket. Games often ended with final scores in the 30s or 40s. Offensive creativity was limited, and the entire strategy was to grind down the opponent possession by possession. The game was slower, more physical, and all about imposing strength in the post. This was the era where basketball became a war of attrition inside the paint. The big man era completely dictated how teams played, coached, and recruited. Feel free to smash that like and subscribe button button for more content like this. Anyways, the fast break and integration era. From 1957 through 1967, the game took a dramatic turn towards speed and athleticism. Fast break offenses became the new wave, completely changing how teams approach the game. Instead of grinding it out in the half court like the previous era, teams pushed the ball up the floor at every opportunity, looking for quick buckets before defenses could set up. The days of methodical, slow-paced play were fading fast. Coaches started emphasizing tempo, conditioning, and transition offense. Players were now expected to sprint the floor, fill lanes, and finish plays in rhythm. Ball movement got faster, and scoring became more dynamic. This was also the era where racial integration transformed college basketball. The most historic moment came in 1966 when Texas Western, now known as UTEP, started an all-black lineup in the NCAA championship game against Kentucky, an all-white team. Texas Western won that game, breaking barriers and changing the landscape of college basketball forever. It forced programs across the country to begin recruiting black athletes at a higher level, fundamentally shifting the talent pool and competitiveness of the sport. Athleticism became the name of the game. Players were quicker, more agile, and capable of playing above the rim in ways fans had not seen before. Teams started spacing the floor better, not because of a three-point line, but to create lanes for cutting and fast breaks. Guards were no longer just pass-first facilitators. They became scorers in transition, finishers, and playmakers on the move. Coaches like Adolph Rupp, John Wooden, and Guy Lewis began adapting their systems to take advantage of this faster tempo. Defensive strategies also evolved. Full-court presses and trap defenses became more common as teams looked for ways to create turnovers and fuel their running games. Big men were still important, but now they had to run the floor and protect the rim in transition. Players who could not keep up with the pace started becoming liabilities. This era demanded versatility from everyone on the court. Scoring increased across the board. Games often hit the 60s, 70s, or even higher. Offenses flowed with constant motion, quick passes, and a relentless push toward the basket. The half-court offense still existed but was no longer the sole focus. This was the decade where basketball finally started to look modern. The fusion of athleticism, speed, and a more inclusive player base elevated the competition and set the stage for even bigger changes ahead. The fast break and integration era was fast, fluid, and transformative in every way. The Wooden Dynasty era. From 1967 through 1975, college basketball was completely dominated by one program, UCLA. Under the legendary coach John Wooden, UCLA captured 10 national titles in just 12 years, a streak of dominance that has never been matched. This era was defined by discipline, fundamentals, and Wooden's famous pyramid of success, which focused on character, preparation, and teamwork above everything else. UCLA's players bought into a system that demanded precision, selflessness, and relentless attention to detail. One of the most surprising rule changes happened right at the start of this era. In 1967, the NCAA banned the dunk entirely, a rule that stayed in place until 1976. The goal was to limit the overwhelming dominance of physically gifted big men, especially players like Lou Alcindor, who later changed his name to Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. The dunk ban forced players to focus on layups, hooks, and finesse finishes rather than pure power at the rim. Despite the dunk being outlawed, UCLA thrived. Their offense was a masterclass in spacing, crisp passing, and constant movement without the ball. Defensively, they suffocated teams with full court pressure and perfectly executed traps. Wooden demanded that every player, regardless of position, understood every aspect of the game. UCLA's dynasty was fueled by legendary talent. Lou Alcindor led them to 3 straight titles from 1967 through 1969. Then came Bill Walton, whose incredible passing, rebounding, and court vision powered UCLA to more championships in the early 70s. Walton's near-perfect performance in the 1973 title game, where he made 21 of 22 shots, remains one of the greatest feats in college basketball history. But it was not just the stars. Wooden's teams were stacked with role players who mastered their jobs within the system. Every player knew their role, whether it was setting screens, boxing out, or making the extra pass. UCLA's ability to stay composed in any situation made them nearly unbeatable. Scoring during this time was efficient but never reckless. Teams still played at a controlled tempo, valuing every possession. The focus was not on speed for the sake of speed, but on maximizing shot quality. This was an era where preparation won games long before tip-off. Wooden's practices were famously intense, structured down to the minute and left nothing to chance. His approach elevated not only UCLA, but the entire sport, forcing opponents to rethink how they coached and played. The Wooden Dynasty era was the gold standard for excellence in college basketball, a blueprint of success built on mastery, discipline, and total team commitment. The expansion and TV era. From 1976 through 1985, college basketball exploded in popularity thanks to massive tournament growth and a surge in television coverage. The NCAA tournament expanded rapidly, transforming from a regional event into into a true national spectacle that millions tuned in to watch. The tournament field grew from 32 teams to 64 by the end of the decade, opening the door for more programs to compete on the biggest stage. With more teams came more upsets, more Cinderella stories, and way more drama. March Madness officially became part of the national sports calendar, capturing the attention of fans everywhere. This era also featured one of the most iconic accomplishments in college basketball history. In 1976, the Indiana Hoosiers, coached by Bob Knight, completed a perfect season. They finished 32-0, winning the national championship without a single loss. No team has managed to go undefeated and win the title since then, a record that still stands. Television played a massive role in all of this. Networks realized how much viewers loved the unpredictability of March Madness. More games were broadcast nationally, and highlights started becoming a daily part of sports culture. Fans who might never have seen certain teams or players suddenly had front row seats to the action from across the country. As the spotlight grew, the stakes got even higher. Programs invested heavily in facilities, recruiting, and coaching. Games became more polished, with broadcasters breaking down strategies, player matchups, and tournament brackets in real time. The exposure also helped turn college stars into household names before they even stepped foot in the professional leagues. The playing style evolved too. Teams started blending the disciplined half-court sets of previous eras with more aggressive, up-tempo transition play. Three-point shooting was still not part of the game yet. It would not arrive until the following era, but offenses were definitely getting more dynamic and creative. This was the era when coaching legends further cemented their legacies. Dean Smith at North Carolina, John Thompson at Georgetown, and Denny Crum at Louisville all built powerhouse programs during these years. Their teams became fixtures in the tournament, and their styles influenced coaches nationwide. Crowds got bigger, arenas filled up faster, and the buzz around college basketball reached levels it had never seen before. Fans began filling out brackets religiously, whether or not they had any clue about the teams. March Madness was no longer just a basketball tournament, it was becoming a cultural event. The expansion and TV era took college basketball from a popular sport to a national obsession, driven by bigger tournaments, brighter lights, and millions watching from home. The three-point revolution era. From 1986 through 1994, the introduction of the three-point line changed college basketball forever. For the first time, players could score from long range and get rewarded with an extra point. This single rule completely reshaped how teams built their offenses and how coaches designed their game plans. Spacing became the name of the game. Teams were no longer just cramming the ball into the post. Guards suddenly had way more responsibility, not just running the offense, but also being major scoring threats from beyond the arc. Defenses had to stretch out to cover shooters, which opened driving lanes and forced big men away from the basket. The ripple effect was huge. Programs that did not have dominant 7-footers could now compete by relying on shooting and spacing. That shift led to way more parity in the game. Upsets became even more common, as smaller schools with hot shooting nights could take down traditional powerhouses. Offenses became faster and way more dynamic. Instead of grinding through every possession, teams pushed the pace, looking for quick threes in transition or drive and kick plays that spread the defense thin. The balance between post play and perimeter shooting created more versatile offensive systems. Players like Stephen Curry's father, Del Curry at Virginia Tech, and others in this era became early examples of how dangerous elite shooters could be in the college game. Guards were now stars, not just playmakers for the big men. Teams started recruiting players specifically for their ability to shoot, no matter their size. Big men still mattered, but they had to adapt. Post players were now asked to defend out to the perimeter and handle ball screens in ways that were never required before. Stretch forwards who could step out and hit shots became highly valuable. This era also brought some legendary tournament runs. Games were wilder, with bigger swings in momentum thanks to the three-point shot. Teams that were down 10 could erase that gap in a matter of possessions. The chaos of March Madness only got more intense. Coaching strategies evolved quickly. Zone defenses were tweaked to account for shooters in the corners. Man-to-man schemes had to extend further from the basket. Ball movement became crucial, as passing up a good shot for a great shot beyond the arc became standard practice. The three-point revolution era officially marked the end of basketball, being purely about size and power. It was now about skill, shooting, and smart spacing. The game felt faster, freer, and way more unpredictable, setting the stage for the modern style fans recognize today, the prep to pro era. From 1995 through 2005, college basketball went through a major identity shift as some of the nation's top high school players skipped college entirely to jump straight to the NBA. Superstars like Kevin Garnett, Kobe Bryant, Tracy McGrady, and LeBron James bypassed the college game altogether, changing both the college landscape and the NBA. With those elite prospects gone, college basketball lost some of the flashiest, highest profile talent, but it also created space for players who stuck around longer to become true college icons. Fans got to follow players like like Tim Duncan at Wake Forest, J.J. Redick at Duke, and Emeka Okafor at Connecticut for multiple years. Their longevity helped build stronger connections between fans and teams during this era. At the same time, March Madness exploded into a full-blown cultural phenomenon. The tournament was no longer just for hardcore basketball fans. It became a national obsession, with office pools, bracket challenges, and wall-to-wall television coverage, turning it into one of the biggest events in sports every single year. The style of play reflected the changing talent pool. Without as many one-and-done superstars, college teams leaned more on chemistry, experience, and player development. Programs were built around upperclassmen who understood their systems inside and out. Ball movement, teamwork, and defensive execution became even more important. Coaches adjusted by focusing on developing players over multiple seasons. Legendary figures like Mike Krzyzewski, Roy Williams, Tom Izzo, and Jim Calhoun thrived in this environment, consistently producing disciplined, well-rounded teams. The tournament itself became even more unpredictable. Veteran-led mid-major programs started making deeper runs, knocking off blue bloods that relied on younger, less experienced rosters. Cinderella stories were everywhere, and fans absolutely lived for the chaos. Meanwhile, television networks doubled down on their coverage. From Selection Sunday to the buzzer beaters in the first round to the Final Four, every moment was broadcast, analyzed, and celebrated. The spectacle surrounding March Madness became as big as the games themselves. While some critics argued the game lost top-tier talent to the NBA, others believe this era highlighted what made college basketball special: the passion, the rivalries, and the emotional investment that came from watching players grow over several seasons. The prep-to-pro era was a balancing act between the loss of the biggest individual stars and the rise of team-driven narratives. It was a time when March Madness became bigger than ever, delivering drama, heartbreak, and unforgettable moments year after year. The one-and-done era. From 2006 through 2019, college basketball was completely transformed when the NBA introduced its age limit rule. High school players could no longer jump straight to the pros. Instead, the top talent was forced to play at least one season in college before entering the draft. This gave rise to the era of freshman phenoms. Powerhouse programs like Kentucky, Duke, and Kansas started building entire rosters around one-year superstars. Players like Anthony Davis, Zion Williamson, John Wall, and Kevin Durant electrified college basketball for a single season before heading straight to the NBA as top picks. These freshmen brought ridiculous levels of talent, athleticism, and highlight reel moments that drew massive attention to the sport. But this model came with trade-offs. Teams stacked with young talent were incredibly explosive, but often lacked the experience and chemistry of older squads. That opened the door for mid-major programs to capitalize. Veteran-led teams with players who had spent 3 or 4 years together routinely pulled off major upsets in the NCAA tournament. Schools like Butler, VCU, and Loyola Chicago became household names during March Madness by toppling the Giants. The gap between raw talent and developed experience became one of the defining storylines of the era. Coaches had to adapt fast. Programs focused on teaching complex systems quickly to freshmen who would only be on campus for a few months. Meanwhile, mid-majors doubled down on fundamentals, toughness, and team-first basketball. The style of play reflected this clash. Power schools often leaned on sheer athleticism, spacing the floor for isolation plays, and letting their stars take over. In contrast, mid-majors ran disciplined sets, worked the shot clock, and relied on precise execution to stay competitive against more physically gifted teams. March Madness thrived like never before. The spectacle was amplified by the constant turnover of big-name players cycling through college for a year. Every tournament brought new faces, new stars, and new Cinderella stories. Fans tuned in knowing that some of the best players in the country were only passing through on their way to the NBA. At the same time, the debate over the one-and-done rule became louder. Some argued it hurt college basketball by turning it into a brief pit stop for top players, while others loved the chance to watch future NBA legends compete in the tournament, even if only for 1 year. The one-and-done era was defined by this tension between short-term star power and long-term program building. It was an era of jaw-dropping talent, unpredictable tournament runs, and non-stop debates about the future of the sport. The transfer portal era. From 2020 through 2021, college basketball entered a completely new reality where roster turnover became the norm. Thanks to changes in NCAA rules, players no longer had to sit out a year after transferring. The transfer portal exploded almost overnight. Instant player movement reshaped how every program recruited, built rosters, and managed team chemistry. Instead of slowly developing players over multiple seasons, coaches now had to constantly rebuild on the fly. 1 year, a team could look like a contender. The next, half the roster was gone, replaced by transfers from all over the country. This shift completely changed the balance of power. Programs that traditionally struggled to recruit top high school talent suddenly found themselves landing proven college players players from bigger schools. Meanwhile, blue blood programs used the portal to patch holes quickly, adding experienced players to complement freshmen or replace unexpected departures. The portal became a marketplace where players could chase better opportunities, bigger roles, or a better fit. Some teams built almost entirely transfer-heavy lineups, blending athletes from different systems, conferences, and styles into a brand new squad in just months. Roster construction became chaotic but fascinating. Coaches had to juggle recruiting high schoolers, retaining their current players, and hunting for transfers, all while keeping everyone happy. The days of a stable, 4-year roster were fading fast. The style of play reflected this constant reshuffling. Teams leaned on simple offensive sets early in the season as new players learned the system. Chemistry often lagged in November, but peaked by March if the pieces fit together right. Some lineups clicked perfectly, while others never fully gelled. The transfer portal also fueled parity. Programs that lacked recruiting power but nailed the transfer market could suddenly compete with the sports giants. At the same time, big-name schools were not immune to losing key players unexpectedly, forcing them to adapt just like everyone else. March Madness became even more unpredictable. Rosters loaded with veteran transfers brought experience and confidence into the tournament, creating more chances for deep runs by non-traditional powerhouses. Upsets became even more likely, simply because the talent gap could shift dramatically from year to year. The transfer portal era was short but wildly impactful. It marked the end of college basketball being about slow development and patience. Instead, it became about instant results, constant roster movement, and building chemistry in record time. Programs that figured it out thrived. Those that did not were left scrambling to catch up. The NIL era. From 2022 to the present, college basketball officially stepped into the business world. For the first time ever, players could legally profit off their name, image, and likeness. That meant endorsement deals, sponsorships, merchandise, social media campaigns, and even personal brands became part of every player's reality. Recruiting wars shifted almost instantly. It was no longer just about playing, time, coaching fit, or tradition. Now, schools with stronger NIL collectives, bigger alumni networks, and more appealing market opportunities held a huge edge. Top prospects started picking programs based on who could offer the best financial packages, not just basketball development. The line between amateur and professional basketball blurred permanently. Players were suddenly negotiating deals worth hundreds of thousands, sometimes even millions, while still suiting up for college games. The era of unpaid student athletes officially came to an end. This changed how coaches operated. It was not just about drawing up plays anymore. Coaches and athletic departments now had to help players navigate brand building, contract negotiations, and public relations. Managing locker rooms became trickier, with players often earning wildly different amounts based on their marketability, not just their skills. Roster stability continued to take hits. Between the transfer portal and NIL money, players had more freedom than ever to move where the best opportunities existed, both on the court and in the bank account. Some schools leaned heavily into NIL to stack talent quickly, while others struggled to keep up with the financial arms race. The product on the floor remained elite, but the dynamics were totally different. Top recruits still made huge impacts, but now they were also media personalities, entrepreneurs, and influencers. Mid-major programs leaned on NIL to retain veteran players who might have otherwise left for smaller pro leagues or transferred to bigger schools. March Madness kept delivering, but with a new twist. Fans were not just following teams, they were following the off-court business moves, the endorsements, and the deals that shaped rosters. The drama was now both on and off the hardwood. For better or worse, the NIL era shattered the old ideas of amateurism in college basketball. Players finally got compensated for the value they brought to universities, networks, and fans. Meanwhile, programs had to evolve fast or risk falling behind in a landscape where talent, money, and opportunity were more interconnected than ever before. This was college basketball's new normal, an open market where the game and the business are forever linked. For more videos like this, smash that like and subscribe button for more content.